Welcome in, Agile Mentors. We're back for another episode of the Agile Mentors Podcast. I'm here as always, Brian Milner. And today we have Mr. Cort Sharp with us. Welcome in, Cort.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. Cort has been a frequent guest of our show. If you've been around for a while, you probably remember some episodes we've done with him. Cort works with us here at Mountain Goat Software. He is a producer and other things. Community manager, other things. He sits in on just about, not every class, but he sits in on a lot of classes and helps produce them and make sure that they work. We previously have had Cort on with sort of this theme that, Cort has his finger on the pulse of things a little bit more because he sees the classes through multiple trainers. He hears the Q&As that take place in all the classes. He even sees some of the emails and some of the messages come through the Agile Mentors community from his work there. So Cort just has some insight that maybe a trainer like myself, who only gets to see, how people question in my classes, that I might not have. So we like to have Cort on to get kind of a broader kind of voice of the people kind of approach, if you will, into things. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what are people talking about now? What are the questions? What are the concerns? What are we hearing now in classes as opposed to maybe a year ago or 6 months ago? So I think probably a good place to start there, Cort, is when people are talking to us about just the common, hey, here's things that's a problem. Here's things that are a pain point. How do you deal with this? What are some of the more common things that you've been hearing across the classes and across the interactions with people who are in our system?
Right. Yeah, I guess I am kind of the collector of questions. But even outside of our classes, I'm hearing a lot of questions I'm hearing a ton in our classes about this, but outside of our classes, whether it's on various social medias, various emails, kind of just questions in general to people who are newer to Scrum, or I guess Agile as a whole, but specifically about Scrum, organizations that are newer to Scrum, is time management. So like how do we fit all of this new stuff? Like all this new stuff is great. All of what we talked about is great. All that we know about it is great. We're on the same page of like, hey, it's a good time to check in daily with our daily Scrum. Make sure we're all on the same page, right? We do need stakeholder feedback with the sprint review. It's good of us to kind of retrospect and use our retrospective to check in on our team and our process and make sure we're doing the right stuff. But how do we fit all of that in with all of the other meetings and stuff that we already have? And you and I were talking a little bit about just kind of what we're going to talk about a bit more. But we were talking about this before we started recording. And I think I told you literally 3 or 4 days ago, I just had a conversation with one of my friends who they're a tech software. They're doing a software project in some organization. And they're like, yeah, they're trying to get us to move to Scrum because they've heard about this thing. And I don't know how you push this, man. I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you live in this world, because they got me in 6 hours of meetings a day and they expect me to get 4 hours of work done. And I'm not sitting at the office for 10 to 12 hours a day. That's ridiculous. So I think the biggest one is the time management, specifically with all of these meetings. And I know my personal take is, I think all of these, or a lot of these organizations, I can't say all, a lot of these organizations are looking at Scrum as an additive to their current process, not a substitute or replacement. Do you see that, Brian? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if they already have a huge slate of meetings that there's going to be some things that Scrum isn't going to replace and shouldn't replace. For example, like one-on-ones with your manager, right? There's not a function inside Scrum for a one-on-one meeting with your manager, nor should there be, because that's not about how a team builds something. That's more general management and HR, So those kind of things, no, it's not going to replace. And there are going to be other meetings outside of Scrum. It's not intended for Scrum to replace all of them, but it is intended to replace some of what you already did. And so for me, it's all about purpose. That's where I think that you should start with everything, is what's the purpose? And if you understand the purpose, then you can compare, ask yourself with the meetings that you have Now, what's the purpose of this meeting? And if you can't answer that, then I would challenge it. I think that an agile organization should be open to challenges for any part of the process. And you should be able to say, hey, I'm not sure why we're doing this. And if we can't really articulate, here's the purpose behind it, it should be gone. We should get rid of it. So I think you're right. I think there is sort of this layering on top of, and if we don't allow the Scrum meetings to replace some of the things that we've done previously, yeah, it can seem like a lot more of a meeting heavy kind of system, but it's the meetings in the system. Let's be clear, right? First of all, it depends on how long your sprint is. But let's just go with the sprint that's the sprint length that's the average or most common, which is 2 weeks. If I have a 2-week sprint, first day of the sprint, I'm going to have sprint planning. That is going to be a long meeting. There's no two ways around it. The official time box is up to 8 hours if you have a month-long sprint. Most people would half that if it's a 2-week sprint. So maximum maybe around 4 hours. So half a day, let's just say. Right? Half the day of your first day is going to be in planning your sprint. Then maybe you finish that meeting up with a small sort of mini daily scrum, but that's it for that day. So you have half the day on day 1. Day 2, day 3, day 4, almost all the days of the sprint that are remaining, you have 15-minute meeting. That's it. If you layer on maybe a backlog refinement, maybe you have another hour-long meeting in the middle somewhere. But there's no other Scrum meetings every day. It's a 15-minute meeting until you get to the last day. So first day, last day, right? First day, 4-hour meeting. Last day, you're going to have the sprint review and the retrospective. So there's going to be some time probably in the first part of your day that you have a sprint review. There's going to be some time in the back part of your day for a retrospective. But those two combined, they're not going to... Maximum, I would say there, if you combine those two, would be the same as the sprint planning, maybe up to about 4 hours or so, maximum. So maybe half a day. So 2 days of your sprint, you've got half the day for meeting, 2 out of 10. And the other days, you've got 15 minutes every day. So yeah, there's a lot of those 15-minute meetings, but they're just one a day. And otherwise you have the entire rest of the day to do whatever you need to do to build. So percentage wise, it's actually a small percentage of the total time that you have to work in the course of 2 weeks.
Right.
If the meetings are not being kept in their time boxes, then that's the issue, right? If we have a daily scrum that goes for an hour, yeah, I would feel like that's a beat down as well. That's not what it's intended to be.
Right. And I've also heard the other really common complaint is about the daily scrum of, I understand it's only 15 minutes. I understand that it's a check-in. I've heard complaints about seen complaints about other meetings where the point of the meeting isn't really well understood across the team, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But specifically about the daily scrum, the biggest complaint I've seen is, okay, it's 15 minutes, but is it actually really only 15 minutes of your day? And again, same buddy of mine, same friend of mine who threw this out to me. And he was like, so let me paint this picture for you. I get in the office, let's say at 9 a.m. I sit down, I respond to a few emails, I look at my emails, I check that out until about 9:30. Our daily stand-up is at 9:30. Our daily scrum's at 9:30. I have to do minimal work because I can't get into any deep work. I can't get into like any major thought work in that first 30 minutes. So I can't really do a whole lot there. Maybe I'll grab a cup of coffee and hang out. That's what most of my days look like. 15 minutes. And then there's always 15 minutes after that 15 minutes to kind of coordinate with whoever I need to work with to get stuff done, to help remove bottlenecks or anything, which is totally fine, right? We encourage kind of that 16th minute, so to speak, outside of it. But the meeting officially ends at 15 minutes. And unless you need to coordinate with someone else, you're free to go, right? So he's like, okay, there's normally another about 15, maybe 30 minutes. So that takes me till about 10:15. Well, lunch is at 11. So I got another 45 minutes of nothing. Can't really do a ton of work. And that's basically my whole morning just gone right out of the gate, right? So it's a 15-minute meeting, But in my friend's world, it's a lot more than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I know what I would say to that. I'm curious what you would say, and then I'll share what I would say to that.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that may blow people's minds. What if you don't have the daily scrum first thing in your day? Right? Maybe what the issue is here is the time of your daily scrum. If it's at 9:30 and that's messing with your day because you can't really get anything done before that, and then afterwards you're spending more time, so it's taking time, and then there's not enough focus time before lunch, so you feel like half your day is gone. Well, what would happen if it was the last thing in your day? What about if you ended the day with a daily scrum? What about if you did it first thing after lunch? There's nothing that says it has to be first thing in the day. The team can decide any point of the day to have the daily scrum. And I encourage the team to experiment with it. Mm-hmm. I've had some teams before who really love end of the day daily scrums because they felt like at the end of the day, we check in with each other. We get together and say, all right, what happened today? Right. Mm-hmm. And they can it's all fresh in their mind because they just finished the day. They can talk through it all. All right. So what does that mean for tomorrow? All right. When we come in tomorrow, we're going to do this. And one of the things that allows is if you have, in most of the places I've worked, you have developers who have sort of different time schedules. Some people will sleep in and come in late and work late. And other people like to come in really early because they like to avoid the traffic. If you have that kind of situation, if you put it towards the back part of your day, then when people come in the morning, it doesn't matter what time they come in, right? They have a big chunk of focus time, but then they can dive in and do things. So to me, your friend's problem is more about that interrupting the block of concentration time. And it just needs to be moved to a place where it doesn't, kind of split that block of focus time.
That's a much better answer than I gave him. I just said, well, what else would you be doing in your morning? And he said, well, probably, putzing around, checking email, doing nothing until lunch anyways.
Well, there is always that, right? I mean, just
right.
because you've got the opportunity to have focus doesn't mean you're going to focus, but that's a whole other set of issues, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And really, I guess my additional answer to him was also, when you're working in an organization, you're making a reciprocal commitment to that organization to say, hey, I will get this amount of work done. You will give me this type of compensation, and there will be communication between everyone.
Right.
And to me, the daily scrum is that communicative part, maybe not necessarily with the organization as a whole, but you're still communicating with your team and you're getting on the same page, you're getting aligned so that you all can meet your reciprocal commitment. So really, is the daily scrum for the team or for the organization? I think you can make an argument for either. But at the end of the day, it's for everyone to get on the same page so that we can move forward. Which, you were going to say something? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say part of that as well is just this is some of the stuff that we talk about in our working on a Scrum team class that we're launching here at Mountain Goat Software is really these kind of more subtleties of how the team works together. When you take a Scrum Master class or something like that, you'll learn that, hey, it's a 15-minute meeting and there's a time box. You may not hear that kind of thing of, hey, well, what works best for this team? Maybe it's the end of the day. Maybe it's the middle of the day. Those are the kind of things that we try to focus on in a WOS class is what's the best way for your team to actually do this thing and actually make it successful. Mm-hmm. One of those other areas that I think is kind of a classification of problems is that classification of things and just kind of general process confusion. People who just don't understand, chunks of the process or why things are done a certain way or how to do certain things. What kind of issues have you heard along those lines?
I cannot tell you how many times I have heard and seen and had conversations with people about velocity and how velocity, some piece of after it's explained to them, they totally get it. They're on the same page. That's all good. Then they run into the issue of explaining it to their leadership. But the understanding of velocity is that it's changeable, or it's a metric to compare teams. And I'm on team A and we have a velocity of 20. You're on team B, you have a velocity of 30. Someone looks at that, oh, bigger number better, right? Brian's team is better than Cort's team.
Right.
No, that's not what it is at all. That's not how it should be used. That's not how it should be handled. That is a misuse of the process. That is a confusion point on what velocity actually is. Velocity, I guess we'll explain it here. Velocity is just a measurement of how much one specific team gets done in a period of time. That's it. How many points? And points are all relative. So story points are relative. They are not the same from one team to the next. So therefore, your velocity cannot be the same from one team to the next or comparable from one team to the next. You might have the same velocities, but it's not like saying, okay, my US American dollar is the same as your US American dollar. Those are two very similar. Those are the same exact thing. Those are very comparable. We're working with different types of measuring is really what it comes down to.
Right. Well, and I get the confusion because Mike's phrase is estimate size, derive duration. So when you start to say, well, a story point is a measure of size, not time, you sometimes get pushback from people to say, yeah, but you're eventually going to translate it into time anyway. And you're right. We're deriving duration from it. But the split we're trying to make there is when we estimate, right? When the developers are doing the estimation, we don't want them thinking in terms of time. We don't want them to make that process forward leap to say, oh, well, then the story point equals this number of hours. So let me do the calculation in my head and figure out how many story points this is going to be. I say this in class. If your organization has a conversion chart like that, a story point equals this number of hours, you're going to have to convince me and explain to me what benefit there is of doing that. Because I have yet to hear anyone say, oh, well, we do that because it gives us this benefit.
Right.
Other than saying, because that's the way our tool works, right? Or, tool we use to manage our process or whatever takes it in this way. And so we have to make the conversion so that we can use this tool. Now the problem is the tool is driving your process. But other than that, there's not really a benefit that anyone can show me for making that conversion, because what the developer ends up doing is estimating in time. And if they're going to estimate in time, wouldn't it be easier just to say our estimate is in hours rather than story points?
Right.
It's 6 hours to do that. It's not one story point.
Right.
That's what I encourage people to do. And the confusion comes from the fact that we do make that duration, we do derive the duration eventually, but that's for the long range forecast. I mean, we say very clearly in all our classes, but we talk about this in the WOST class, in the working on a Scrum team class, that when you're estimating something, you're thinking in terms of size, you're thinking in terms of risk, comparative to other things. And there's really only two reasons that we would use story points. One is to make those longer term forecasts, but the other is to help the product owner to know the relative cost of things so they can prioritize. But the thing you're mentioning, Cort, is to use it as a performance metric, and that's where people fall into I think a big trap. But when you use it as a performance metric, it actually destroys the other two reasons. Mike says this: we have a good thing going with the other two reasons, right? Organizations want to be able to forecast forward. Organizations need the product owner to be able to know the relative cost of something so they can prioritize. Those are good things. So why go in and destroy it by also trying to use it as a performance metric? Because those two things are needed still. And we won't have a way of doing those.
Right. Yeah, totally. I agree with that. I don't really have anything to add. You just kind of knocked that one out of the park there, Brian.
Yeah, no, I mean, velocity, some of these, part of it's, these are all new terms for a lot of people as well. And so you hear terms like velocity and think, oh, what does that mean? And I get it. If you're a manager and you're not really familiar with this kind of stuff and you hear the term velocity and you think, oh, that's the speed of the team. Well, yeah, it is the speed of the team, right? And if it's the speed of the team, why can't I use that to judge one team against the other? Because it's like using, Fahrenheit and Celsius. I mean, it's metric and imperial. They're different measures. And so one number doesn't equal the same thing as the other.
Right.
Now, there are some scaled frameworks like SAFe that will try to level set across teams by having sort of a little cheat sheet saying, hey, this is an example of a 5-point story. This is an example of an 8-point story. So that the teams can maybe relatively compare against the same definitions of sizes. But I got to say, even there, the teams are going to be off. The teams are not going to be perfectly aligned. That's the only thing that you can really do to try to align those, but they still have their own conversations. They still reach their own conclusions. And so the scales aren't going to be perfectly aligned no matter what you do.
I think even more importantly, beyond they have their own conversations, or I guess more fundamentally, not more importantly, more fundamentally, is that they have different people on different teams, right? You have different skill sets, you have different abilities, you have different people working on different stuff. I think I've programmed a little more recently than you have, maybe, or it might be vice versa. I know you've recently just built a website again, but I would probably wager my programming skill set in like, I don't know, Ruby on Rails is probably I got a little edge up on you right there, right?
Definitely so.
So if we were on different teams, okay, Cort's on this team, Brian's on that team. How can we possibly compare this different skill sets to each other and expect the same result, the same speed, the same pace? You were talking about, oh, it's like comparing using Fahrenheit and Celsius. The first one that popped into my mind was miles and kilometers per hour, miles per hour, kilometers per hour, right? Speed in different cars. And then even beyond that, I guess building on the car analogy, that's like comparing a high-end Ferrari to my little first car ever, which was a Saturn Ion little beater, could barely get up to 60 miles an hour thing. Those are two different cars. They're two different skill sets, and they require two different viewpoints to even be able to compare them. There are comparisons you can make, 4 wheels, steering wheel, whatever. But at the end of the day, one of those is going a whole lot faster, and it was not my first car. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to compare it as well. What about things that have to do, and I'll kind of combine some thoughts here, but maybe like what about things that are kind of more role centric, or even just how the team works together? What kind of issues have you heard people mention recently in those areas?
So managers, for one, like what is the role of managers within Scrum? What's the difference between a product owner and a product manager? Is there a product manager? Does that person even exist? Do we just need to fire all of our product managers or turn them all over into product owners? That one's very common. But I think another really common one is when does the Scrum Master step in? And the first time I took my first Scrum Master class, I can't say first time I took one. I've only officially taken one, but I've been in, if you look at the title of a podcast episode a couple episodes ago, a rough estimate of 1 billion Scrum classes. Laura Kendrick and I have been in 1 billion Scrum Master classes. That was the fun conversation we had. But I made that I needed that question answered to help me kind of grasp what is this new role. This is not a very traditional, typical thing that you see within organizations of the Scrum Master. As the Scrum Master, do I help estimate? Do I help prioritize the backlog? What do I do? Am I a team lead? Is everyone trying to talk with me on the daily stand-up? And is it my role or my job to take notes, hold people accountable to what they're saying? Or is that kind of just my job to say, okay, cool, we did it, we're good. I facilitated this meeting. I put it on all your calendars. You showed up, and do your thing. I'm out. See ya. Right. So I think the Scrum Master role as a whole, there's a bit of confusion on that. And product or project managers.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
how do we manage those or handle those?
The other titles, no matter what other title that you have, first of all, let's separate out. This is part of what people need to understand. Do not confuse job title with Scrum role, right? Because you can have, let's say I'm hired as a project manager, but now I'm going to be on a Scrum team. I could be the Scrum Master on that Scrum team. Does that change my job title? No, I'm still hired as a project manager. So that's kind of the thing that people need to understand. You don't have to have the job title Scrum Master, or now we're doing Scrum, so now we got to fire our project managers and hire Scrum Masters, right? That's not necessarily the case. It's a role on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, Scrum defines 3. It defines Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Developer. It doesn't define any others. Doesn't mean you don't have them. Mike has this phrase that I love. He says, the Scrum Guy doesn't mention tacos, but it doesn't mean we don't have tacos.
Right.
The one I like to say in class is, it also doesn't define a CEO, but I bet you have a CEO. I bet your company has a CEO. It's not saying that you don't need these other roles or that there's no place for them in an organization using Scrum. It's saying Scrum is going to define for you how a single team works. And if you have a product manager, maybe that's more of a scaled thing of how we manage that product across multiple teams. If you have project managers, maybe that's about coordinating information across teams. If you have business analysts, maybe that's helping product owners to write stories. Maybe they are a product owner. I don't know. If you have managers are usually not on a Scrum team unless they're really expert at doing a certain skill. Sometimes I'll see managers who are developers on a team, but the power dynamic is a weird thing on a Scrum team, and that's something to be careful of. If you do have someone who is a manager of any kind on a Scrum team, I would, if at all possible, try to make sure that they don't have any direct reports that are also on that same team. They can be on another team with other people that don't report to them. But if you have them on a team with people that directly report to them, now you got this weird power dynamic within this team that's supposed to be a team of equals, but it's not a team of equals because one person's going to fill out a performance report on me. So how safe do I feel to, say I made a mistake around a manager who's going to put that on my performance report? That's the danger.
Right.
But yeah, I think you can have any of these other roles. And as far as the Scrum Master is concerned, when does a Scrum Master step in? Well, let me ask everyone listening to think about this question. If you were a parent of a child, when do you step in if you have a child who's doing something that could be harmful? And think about this. I didn't tell you what age the child was, right? Mm-hmm. If you have an infant, you're going to step in a lot quicker. You're going to protect them a lot more. If you have a teenager, you might give them a lot more leash and say, hey, that's your responsibility, right? You know kind of how to do this. And if they insist on doing something a way that you don't think is the right way, at a certain point as a parent, you have to just say, you know what, this is their lesson to learn. Mm-hmm. And, they need to have I believe very strongly as a parent that you have to really defend your kids' rights to make their own mistakes. And right. I'm not saying developers are kids, or I'm not saying that, you're, as a Scrum Master, you're the parent of the team. Please don't interpret it that way. But I am saying there's a parallel to this to say, as a Scrum Master, knowing when to step in is a issue by issue decision. At this instance, how harmful will it be if they do this thing? Is this a kid running out in front of a truck coming down the street? Well, I'm going to stop that.
Right.
Is this, hey, don't touch that plate, it's hot? I've told you 50 times, don't touch that plate, it's a hot plate. Okay, well, hey, maybe it's time for you to touch that hot plate and understand that, hey, next time I'm not going to touch that hot plate,
I totally agree. I'm a little more, and I understand I'm a little biased in this, but I'm a little more of a fan of the Scrum Master. The best, or a good analogy of a Scrum Master is like a coach on a team, like a sports team is what I'm saying.
Gee, I'm
biased.
Can't understand why that would resonate with you.
Who would have thought? Recently, I'm on a little hiatus right now, but I am a swim coach, head coach. And I think the parallel there is just much easier for me to grasp, because think of a coach. You are supporting your team. You're stepping in when needed. You're talking with, whether it's officials or referees or someone that's a little higher up, has a little more authority than you or your team has in a moment. You're not being disrespectful to them. Yeah. You're just communicating, you're conversing, you want to get their understanding, and you want to communicate that to your team and work within whatever kind of scope is set there. You're working within the scope of the rules. So I like to view that as kind of like, here's the general organization rules that we follow and standards and practices and all that stuff. But I'm not the one, me personally, I'm not the one jumping in the water and doing the races, right? I'm not the one out there on the court dribbling the ball up and down. I'm not the one out there on the field tackling people, right? I'm there to help the team formulate a plan, help the team execute that plan, and help the team really just do what they can't, or remove as much of their stress as possible so that they can only focus on doing their job, which in the coaching space sport coaching space is, let the team go out and swim, let the team go out and play football, let the team go out and play basketball or baseball or softball or whatever it is, right? Let them do their thing. You're there to help them and make their day on game day, on meet day, as easy as possible and as seamless as possible for them, right? So
Absolutely agree.
there was something that you said there too, Brian, that got my gears turning a little bit. You were talking about how the kind of power dynamic, if like a manager is on a team and someone reports to them, there's that power dynamic there. But you said that everyone is on an equal playing field within Scrum. Like we're all on the same level within our team. We might have different roles, but we're all on the same level. And that kind of got me moving into like, what have you seen that one kind of helps establish that we're all on the same team, we're all on the same playing field, we're all working together. I might be the product owner, so I might have I do have guidance over here's the direction we're going to go, more so than maybe the Scrum Master does with the product development itself. But how do you kind of build that trust within a team to be able to say, yeah, I see you, Cort, as an equal contributor here, even though you're the one saying, we need to do this, and the other thing in the next 2 weeks. Because I see a lot of questions about that. I see a lot of struggles with that. And I think that's a very common issue that a lot of people face within a Scrum team, because it is so different from, I report to my manager. You don't report to your Scrum Master. You don't report to your product owner. You sit down and have conversations with them. So how do you kind of foster that and facilitate that type of environment?
Great question. And like the kids used to say a while back, there's the rub. That's kind of the key point there. There's a thing we say about Scrum where a lot of trainers and coaches will say this: Scrum is simple to understand, difficult to master. And that is precisely what's meant by that. And that's kind of some of the stuff that we try to capture in this working on Scrum team class is that difficult to master portion. Because, how do you gain trust from someone else? Well, that's not in the Scrum guide, right? We're not going to be able to, look that section up and say, here's the rules on how you start to trust someone else that you're working alongside. That's a difficult thing. How do you do it? Well, it takes time. It's like any other kind of relationship you have with another human being. You can't walk in from day one and say, hey, we're going to now have this deep trust with each other. You have to extend it and you have to earn it. That's the way that it's built. And that has to happen over time. You have to display that I have trust in you and I'm worthy of your trust. So when you put your trust in me, you can count on me, right? I'm going to be here and I'm going to do what it is you expect me to do. That's really the only answer that works for that. It's difficult. It is the human working dynamic, I think, is the undervalued kind of glue that holds a lot of this other stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of stuff that a good Scrum Master, I think, can really make an impact on, because, hey, they're not just going to know a time box. That's kind of just Scrum 101.
Right.
But they're going to also know, well, what happens when I have two team members who get in a big conflict, who disagree? Am I hands off and I just let that run? And all of a sudden now we have a team that splits, that fractures along that line. Or do I roll up my sleeves and get involved and have the skills to help them navigate that conflict and come back as a team without resentment, without losing trust in each other, but really working honestly with each other and being productive when we come back. That's the difficulty. And like I said, that's something we tried to capture when we kind of created that working on a Scrum team classes. What are some of those more subtleties of the nuances that really are, the heart of whether the team is going to work or not.
Right. I think even beyond just what do these look like, I think the way I view working on a Scrum team is it's for everyone on a Scrum team, right? It's not just for Scrum Masters. It's not just for product owners. It's not just for developers. It gives you a big picture. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah.
It gives you a big picture of how effective you can truly be when you are working together on a Scrum team, right? You were talking a little bit about the human working dynamic or nature, one of those. And as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, we should double click into that a little bit. But very briefly, maybe double click into it a little bit of when we work together and humans are working together, and not working in siloed environments, not saying, hey, you know, I'm the front end developer. I did my mock up. I'm out. I'm done. Figure it out, everyone else. You're struggling with your database stuff. Tough. I'm done with my thing. I'm going to sit back and sip a colada on Tahiti's beaches or whatever. Right? We're not doing that. We're helping each other out. We're working together, and we're saying, okay, cool. You're having database issues. I don't know anything about databases, but maybe I can help look up some stuff, or I can find some help you out in some way that isn't inhibiting you from doing your job. But it might not be like doing it. It's definitely not doing your job for you. And it's not like it's I know everything about databases, or I know enough about databases to be able to get by. It could be even as basic as, we run into this error code. Cool. I'll look that up for you and send you the results and save you a little time, hopefully that way or something. But it's that team collaboration. It's working together as a team. I like the perfect example, which I pretty sure we talk about this in a working on a Scrum team course as well, of developers and testers working together in tandem and saying, hey, instead of, we like to say developers finish their code and then we throw it over the proverbial wall, and all right, testers, you got to catch it, figure it out, and then test it, right? Developers maybe sit side by side with testers or hop on a call, not too dissimilar from what we're doing here. Just hop on a call with each other and say, okay, let's figure out that the verification that the password meets the requirements. Okay, cool. Tester, you want to write up the tests? I'll start developing or working on the code for it. Awesome. Here's my code. Here's my thought process. Do you have any thoughts, tester? Do you see any edge cases right out of the gate that I should keep an eye out for or work on? I think that is the bigger picture that working on a Scrum team really highlights and really focuses on, and allows a lot of people to kind of open their eyes a bit more and see the forest through the trees, so to speak, to be able to understand, here's the value and here's what it actually means to be working on a Scrum team, rather than just, here's my role. Cool. I'm going to go do my role, do my thing, and see ya, everyone else. Figure it out.
Yeah, not that it ignores the basic components and the ground rules that help us, but it goes beyond that to say, how do you actually make this thing work? So yeah, that's a
Absolutely.
great point.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this has been really useful. I really appreciate you taking time to do this, Cort, and coming back. And I'm sure we'll do this on a periodic basis, just to check in and see, oh, hey, what are you hearing now? What kind of are the hot button issues now? So thanks for sharing that and keeping your ears open, and continue to do that so we can do more of these.
Hey, happy to, Ryan. Always fun just seeing what's going on out there, what conversations are being had, and I hope this actually like helps someone, right? I hope this helps solve, either clears up some confusion about, maybe what the daily stand up is for, or what the daily scrum is for, or who it's for, or hopefully it doesn't add more confusion. But if it does, you know where to go, right?
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Cort.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.